Today, we're going to talk about the intermediate state, a continuation from last week's talk on mortality. In summary, I think before we go further, because this topic can be quite fuzzy, the Bible is not very clear, but a few things we can be sure of. The heaven that ultimately that we are going to would be the new heaven and new earth when Jesus comes again. And at that time, it'll be a physical place. At this time, heaven is a spiritual realm. It's a dimension. And therefore, it would seem that there would be no need for a temporary physical body if we are in a spiritual heaven. However, there is some discussion about this. And so today's talk will deal with regard to the intermediate state. What happens when the believer dies? He goes to the spiritual heaven, awaiting his new body for the new heaven and new earth. And this was not a topic in Packer's books. I've taken some material from other sources. The principle is that Christians who die will be with Christ. They do not sleep until they are resurrected. They are not. They don't go to purgatory, as we looked at last week, because Paul clearly states that we are confident, yes, well pleased, rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. So what is the intermediate state? From the time believers die and until they return to Christ, until they return with Christ at the last day, the judgment day, they're in some form of conscious state. And theologians call this the intermediate or the in-between state. So the question that arises, because we don't really have much clarity on this, is where is this place, the spiritual heaven now? And what does the believer who goes there after death look like while awaiting the general resurrection? So as we've always said, until Christ comes again, he is in heaven. It is a dimension that we cannot see or sense with our physical body. So if we're looking from a material point of view, space, time, and material, we are not going to be able to see heaven. But it is an actual and real spiritual dimension and the very physical dwelling place of God. So it is a dimension from which angels and Jesus can actually breach to our material space-time continuum where we are today, time, space, and matter. They can come depending on God's will. But we cannot go the other way until we die. And this is true. There are some aspects in the Bible where God has opened this spiritual realm for people to see. One example is Stephen, and we'll come to that. So it can be a universe next door that's normally hidden, but sometimes open. And that opening is one way. And sometimes humans are allowed to see into heaven. So Stephen said, full of the Holy Spirit, he looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God. And Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And he tells the people around him, he says, look, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. So he actually saw. So in his specific situation, God opened this dimension, allowed him to see where he was going to go so that he could testify to this. And this is the dimension to which we go in the intermediate state. In this intermediate state, we are awake and conscious. We see many of these examples in the Bible. Lazarus and the rich man, when Jesus talked about the story of them in Abraham's bosom, they were conscious. They were talking to each other. The dying thief on the cross, you will be with me in paradise. Paul wanted to be with the Lord in heaven. And the dead martyrs, Revelation 6, are pictured in heaven crying out to God to bring justice on earth. So there's some consciousness in the spiritual heaven. What about our intermediate state? Now, the syncretic view held by Christian universalists today and universalists who are not Christian is that the soul leaves the body and comes back in some other way. That is the reincarnation view. So the soul does leave the body, but it goes into this ethereal type space and comes back. And this is, of course, unbiblical, and we cannot accept it. Unfortunately, there are quite a number of Christian universalist theologians who are posting on the internet, and many of our any of my friends, for example, they actually devour this kind of information. But there are essentially three main views for Christians of what we will look like in heaven. The first is the disembodied spirit, which is the historical view. The believer is conscious as a disembodied spirit. So we're basically spirit beings. Just like the angels have no physical form, we are a spiritual entity in that sense. And our glorified body will only be received at the resurrection, the general resurrection. So we basically become disembodied spirits awaiting the resurrection. There is an interval of time between death and the resurrected state. And this is the place where we are now. This is the disembodied spirit. So the original church would say it this way: we are embodied soul at the moment, soul and body now. When we die, we become disembodied. And at the general resurrection, we are re-embodied. The second view is that there's a temporary body. This is a view that I only became aware of after I read Randy Alcorn's book on heaven. And I was kind of surprised when I saw that he stated that the believer has a quote unquote temporary body while waiting for their glorified body. And this was new to me because I had not seen it before. So I went back to my old seminary textbook, which is by Wayne Grudem, Systematic Theology in the 90s. That was the recommended book. And I looked up this whole intermediate state, and lo and behold, he doesn't have it, even a mention of this so-called temporary body. So it was not even a point of view just 30 to 40 years ago. But now I see that even another book by David Jeremiah talks about temporary body. And the most quoted verse to support this position is that we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed in our heavenly dwelling. So what Randy Alcorn says basically is there is at least one physical body in heaven, and that is the God-man Jesus. And so it makes kind of sense that maybe we will also have some kind of physical body in this spiritual realm. And so many feel that Paul in this verse is expressing a desire to be clothed in some way, and therefore this temporary body theory or point of view has come. But this is really a minority view. But I suspect given the popularity of these teachers now, it is possible that this may become a dominant view in the years to come. The third view, which is actually quite rare or hardly held in the ancient church, is that the believer immediately receives their glorified body. There is no waiting for a general resurrection of the dead, and they are instantly given the glorified body. And these are the most quoted verses. When Christ, who is your life, is revealed, then you will also be revealed with him in glory. Sometimes, these are ways that we eisegese into verses. We have a point of view and we try to find verses to support it, get proof texts. But the general point of view from the ancient church and most of the ancient church fathers, including Tertullian, Justin Martyr. There is a website I went where they had all the quotations, all these old ancient fathers. None of them believed in the second and third view. All of them stated that we are a spirit. We are the soul leaves the body and is with Jesus until the general resurrection. So this is the historical view. The historical view is that we become disembodied spirit. The soul leaves the body at death and is disembodied until Christ comes again. That's the whole premise, the plain meaning or reading of 1 Corinthians 15. And the problem with the view of an intermediate physical body or an immediate glorified body, it actually contradicts some of the biblical teaching with regard to the timing. Because these verses which are being used to justify a possible uh, physical body emphasize that the whole bodies, we'll get our bodies when Christ returns, not before. So there is a temporal aspect to these verses, which, if they are read in their plain meaning, refer to the final resurrection. So I think it might behoove us to hold on to the historical view, um, which appears to be the most biblical view. Now, this is a question that came up last week. Are those in the intermediate state aware of what we are doing? And for that, this is difficult territory because statements that they're aware of us or able to listen to us or praying for us can be taken to extremes. And I can understand the grief of people who lose a loved one, who feel that I've lost, are they listening to me? This particularly happened to my mom because she was in her 80s when she lost her husband, and she found it, and she was living alone. It was a major, major issue for her. And she'll always ask me, is Papa listening to me? Can he hear me? And I had very little answers for her, to be honest. But looking through the literature and looking through some of the books on theology, the martyrs seem to be praying for some specific action on earth. They are praying for some kind of retribution. When, Lord, will you avenge our death? There could be a sense that they are talking to God, and they are addressing God. So it says, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth, So there's some sense that they are asking, Lord, when are you going to avenge us for the things that were done to us, those people who are now on the earth, right? So there's that sense. Secondly, if they do have some sense of what's happening on the earth because of this, can we not talk to them? Luke 16, for example, Lazarus and the rich man. Many people, and I'm in that category, I think this is a true story. Most of the time when Jesus talked in parables, he used hypotheticals or he used metaphors. But in this case, there were many specifics in this story, which is also called a parable, naming Lazarus, naming the rich man, how many brothers he had. So much so that many theologians believe that when Jesus was speaking to the people, they were totally aware of who Lazarus was and who the rich man was, and who the rich man's brothers were. And they were talking about, the rich man was talking about his brothers, and they are still on earth. Go and warn them, please, help them, and so on and so forth. So can we talk to them? Some theologians say you can talk to them, but you cannot pray to them. And then I went and thought about what the original church thought about on All Souls Day, for example. Hundreds of years ago, well, not even more than 100 years ago, people used to go to the site where people had died, where their parents had died, look at the grave and just say, Dad or Mom, you were a wonderful person. You did great things for us, and thankfully you're in the arms of Jesus. You're kind of talking, but you're not praying to them. So that's about all I could find on this. I don't know if that'll help Richard and Alan, particularly with this question, but we can discuss that in the QA. In summary, the New Testament does not seem concerned to be specific or super specific with the form of how we will be, the form of the dead in the intermediate state. So when it's not concerned about that, it doesn't give us specificities. The historical position, I think, should hold that we are embodied persons. We are then disembodied. When we die, our soul goes to heaven. It's a spiritual realm. And at the general resurrection, we'll be re-embodied. And Stafford Carson says, we are created as embodied souls, and the separation of soul and body is only a temporary condition between death and final resurrection. This, I think, would be the historical position which we could hold. But we can emphasize that the intermediate state is a state of heightened righteousness. We are now, when there's no more sin, there's no more death, no more shame, no more guilt. A big difference from what we are now in the embodied state. And so we should likely emphasize that aspect of it. Beyond that, we are better off thinking and praising God in this world just for our final destiny. Because the main concern of the Bible is the ultimate destiny of believers and their glorified bodies, not mentioning so much about the intermediate state. And the resurrected state on the new earth with Jesus is the culmination of God's plan. And I look forward to that day, honestly, because we will have our new bodies, we will know our parents or those who have left before us, and it probably will motivate us in this world to really go out in mission to share the gospel, because we want our good friends, our relatives to join us in the new heaven and new earth.